This is Excel video number 2 for Excel Module 3 in the Shelly Cashman Office 365 textbook. We're starting with absolute versus relative addressing. That's on page 3-20. He's got an explanation there on 3-20 and 3-21, but there's not a whole lot of examples. I'll provide a link to another video that gives you more detail on the difference between absolute and relative cell addresses. So for now, though, let's go to page 3-23. We want to put a formula in cell B5. So this is how much money we took in. It's the revenue. And down here is the margin. So the margin is the percentage of the cost of goods sold above what they paid for it. And what that would mean is that 20% of this number is what it cost the department store, and the remaining 80% is their margin, which they use to take out their expenses and hopefully have some left over for a profit. So what we want to find here is the cost of goods sold. If I take the number up here and multiply it by this, that's going to give me my margin. So what I want to do is I want to subtract this from 100%, get, about 19%, and then multiply that by this, and that'll give me the cost of goods sold. And if I subtract those two, I'll get the margin. Now, another way to do this would have just been to go down here to the gross margin box and multiply the revenue up here by the margin percent down here, and you'd get it directly. He's dividing it up into two steps. So we're going to put a formula here to calculate the cost of goods sold. It's going to be this number multiplied by 100% minus this number, so about 19%. So let's go ahead and put that formula in. A formula starts with an equal sign. It's going to be this cell up here, B4. You can use the arrow key to move up to it, which is what I did. Or you can take the mouse and you can click on it. Or you can just type B4. I want to take that number and I want to multiply it, asterisk, by the quantity. I want to do the subtraction first. So to make sure the subtraction gets done first, I have to put parentheses around it. And it's going to be 100% minus this number down here. Go ahead and close parentheses. So if I take 100% minus 81%, it's going to be just a little less than 19%, which is about 1/5. So the number I get when I do this multiplication should be about 1/5 of this, which would be a little under 300,000. So let's go ahead and hit enter. We should get a number a little under 300,000. So 275,000 is the number that we get for cost of goods sold. Now, I'm going to take this formula and I'm going to copy it across. Okay, I'm just going to copy it across to February to demonstrate something. So if I copy that across, the way that Excel does cell references, if I move a formula to the right, it takes the references in the formula. The original references were B4 and B19. So if I slide over to column C, it assumes that I want C4 and C19. Well, I don't want C19. There's nothing down there in C19. So I get, 100% minus 0, and I'm going to get a number that's exactly the same as my revenue. So what I want to tell Excel is that when I copy this formula to the right, it's okay to change the B4 to C4 because I want to take this number and multiply it. But I want to multiply it by 100% minus B19. The B19 is not supposed to change. So I need to go in here and edit this formula. And the way you say don't change this cell reference when you copy it is you put a $sign in front of the letter and you put a $sign in front of the number. So the $sign in front of the B means don't change the B when you copy this. The $sign in front of the 19 means don't change the 19 when you copy this. You need to put both of them in there. That's called an absolute cell reference. No matter where I copy this formula to, that term will always be B19 if I put the $signs in. Now it's also to put just a $sign in front of the B or just a $sign in front of the 19. And that's called a mixed cell reference. Part of it's absolute and part of it's relative. And we're not going to get into that right now. We're just going to look at absolute cell references. So I'm going to change that to B19 with $signs in the B19. This number does not change, but now I'm going to copy this formula to the right. And what I should get over here, this is about 70,000 less. So I should get approximately $14,000 less than this number over here, which would give me around 260,000. Okay, so let's take this, let's copy it across, and we get about 263,000. Okay. Now watch what happens if I double click on this first formula here. The blue number's up here, the red number's down here. That's exactly what I want. Now we're going to go over here, we're going to double click on the next formula, and the blue number's up here. The red number did not change because of the dollar sign. So that's an absolute cell reference. And if you don't understand absolute and relative cell references, you'll never be an Excel user. This is something that's pretty fundamental to creating any spreadsheet of any size. And if you don't learn how to do this, it'll be too much work to create your spreadsheet. So this is probably the most important thing you can learn about Excel is the difference between relative and absolute cell references. Okay, so that formula is correct now. I'm going to hit escape so I don't mess up this formula. And now that it's correct, I can copy it all the way across to G5. Okay. Now let's go down to B6. We want to know the gross margin. It's going to be this number minus this number. And when I copy it across, I want this number minus this number. And when I copy it across, I want this minus this. So those are going to be relative cell references. I do want them to change every time I copy the formula to the right. So my formula is going to be equals, and I'm just going to use the arrow keys to point to B4, and then a minus, and use the arrow key to point to B5. And now my formula says B4 minus B5. Hit enter. And it is this number minus this number. That can be copied across. Now I'm going to double click on this and you'll see it's subtracting the two numbers right above. Those are relative cell references, which means if I copy it across, the B's will change to C's. So let's go over here and take a look. And the B's get changed to C's. If I go over here, they're D's. Hit escape when you're done. Double click, hit escape. So relative cell references, if you copy to the right, the column letter will change, increase by 1 every time you move one column to the right. You can also copy them to the left, although that's less frequent. And if you do, then the column letter will decrease by 1 as you copy to the left. That's what a relative cell reference does. Now let's turn to Excel page 3-24. There's a description there of the if function. The if function is used to make a decision about which number to put in a cell. The way it works is like this. You look at something that is frequently called a Boolean expression, but in Excel, they usually call it a logical test. And a logical test is just something that's true or false. Most of the time, a logical test is created by comparing two numbers. And actually, they won't really be numbers. They'll be cell references that point to cells that have numbers in them. The way you compare numbers in Excel is at the top of page 3-25. There's a little table there, table 3-8, and it shows you all of the comparison operators. These are basically the operators that you learned in algebra, but when we do greater than or equal, there is no greater than with a line underneath it, so we have to combine the two symbols together. Don't put a space between them. If you do, Excel doesn't like it. Same thing with less than or equal, and then not equal looks a little funny. Basically, the way you read that is less than or greater than, but not equal to. Okay, so those are the 6 comparison operators. That's usually what you use if you're going to use an if function and create a logical test. Okay, so now we're going to enter an if function. We're going down to the bottom of page 3-25. We're going to click cell B9. So B9 is the bonus cell right here. We want to insert a function. We want to insert the if function. If you go to your formulas tab, I'm already on that. If you go to your formulas tab, this is a logical function. Click on logical here. And one of our choices is if. And you notice there's several other ones that are related to the if function. If they start with if, they're similar to the if statement. The one you probably use most often is probably just plain old if. So Excel, if you go up here and you pick your function, or if you go here and pick your function as well, Excel comes up with this nice function arguments dialog box, and it tells you what arguments you have to provide to the function. So the first thing we have to provide is a logical test. Okay, so let's flip over to page 3-26. And our logical test is I want to know if B4, the revenue, is greater than or equal to B21. Okay, so this is the minimum that we need for a bonus. So we can either type that in or we can just point and click. So I want to know if that number is greater than or equal to the number down here in B21. Okay, now I'm going to copy this formula across, and when I do, I don't want this cell reference to move. I want it to stay right there. So that needs to be an absolute cell reference. So it needs to be $B $21. The value, if true, is going to be what's in B20. So the bonus is $5,000. So let's put in B20. That one is also always in column B. There is nothing else in the other columns. That needs to be an absolute cell reference as well. So $B, $20. And if they don't meet the threshold for a bonus, then their bonus is going to be 0. So just put a 0 in the value of false. So if this first logical test is true, the number 5,000 will appear in the cell. If this first logical test is false, the value 0 will appear in the cell. This number is greater than 1.25 million, so we should get the number 5,000 appearing in that cell. Go ahead and click on OK. And we're going to take that and we're going to copy it across through June. So there were 3 months here where it was greater than 1.25 million, and there are 3 other months where it was not over 1.25 million. So let's go to the top of page 3-27. We're going to enter the remaining formulas for January. Salary is what goes in B10. The formulas for this are given on page 3-27. I'm just going to type them in, then we'll go back and talk about them a little bit. When you get to B14, we're going to use the Autosum. So we need to go back to the Home tab. Our Autosum button is over here. Click on Autosum. It will try to add the numbers up here. It doesn't include these numbers because it stops when it gets to a blank cell. So this is definitely what we want. It's always a good idea to double check, make sure the dancing line actually surrounds the numbers that you want summed. Go ahead and hit the Enter key, and that's the answer that you should get. Now we're going to go down to operating income, and the formula for operating income is going to be B6 minus B14 equals B6. And I like to click on it because then you know you're getting the right number. Then a minus sign, and then B14. Go ahead and hit enter. We can take these formulas and we can copy them all the way across through June. Now let's go back and look at these formulas. So in B10, we're doing the salary. Let's double click on that. And we want to take our revenue times 20%. So that's going to be our percent allowed for salary. Hit escape. If I go over here, it's going to take the revenue for February, but the 20% does not change. Hit escape. And if you go all the way across here and double click on each one of these salary cells, the blue term is going to refer to what's up on row 4 for the current column. But the red term is always going to be B22 down here because we put a $ in front of the B and a $ in front of the 22. Okay. If we look at these other cell references, let's go down here and look at site rental. Same thing. B4 is relative, so as I copy this across, it's going to change to C4, D4, E4, and so on. But $B, $23 is an absolute cell reference. Hit escape. The absolute cell reference will not change. Let's double click here. B23 does not change because of the $signs. Hit escape, double click on this one. B23 is still over there. So it's doing exactly what we want. These other rows do the same thing. The total expenses does not use any absolute cell references, so it's just going to give me the sum of the 5 numbers above. Hit escape, double click on this one, I get the sum of the 5 numbers above, and all the way across, I'm going to get the sum of the 5 numbers above. So it's doing exactly what we want to do. And this would be very difficult to do. You know, all of these formulas in this range right here, if you didn't know how to do absolute cell references, they would be really tough to do. You'd probably have to enter them all manually. And like I said, if you don't know how absolute cell references work, you're not going to take the time to do that on a spreadsheet of any significant size. It's really nice if all you got to do is enter them once and you can copy them across. So I got a little bit ahead of the textbook. Let's turn to page 3-28. We have already copied those formulas across. So let's go down to the bottom of page 3-28. And we're going to determine row totals in non-adjacent rows. So I want some totals over here. So we're going to select those 2 cells. Then we're going to select the other cells down here. So this is a non-adjacent selection. Make sure you hold the control key down before you click and drag. And then down here, we also want a total. So we should have 3 areas selected. This one doesn't turn gray because the last cell that you select always looks different. It doesn't turn that one gray, but it is selected. And now what we want to do is we want to do an Autosum. Click on Autosum. If you do that to the right of a row of cells, it will assume that you want to add everything on the row. Now, I don't trust Excel to always do the right thing, so I'm going to double click on this and make sure it's doing the right thing. I'm going to try it on a few more here just to make sure. Okay, so it looks like it's working. So now we're at the top of page 3-29, and it says save the workbook again in the same storage location. So just go up here, click on your save button, and it will save it for you. And actually, if you had autosave automatically turned on for you like I did, you won't even have to do that. It should be saved out there for you. The bottom of page 3-29 talks about nested forms of the if statement, but he doesn't actually have you do any of that. I've also got some video references that talk about that, and I'll make those available to you as well. But this looks like a good place to stop this video.